I do want to begin, though, with this Google elections question. How bad is it?
It's much worse than you think. So however bad you think it is, it's much worse. So I can just give you two numbers and maybe that will summarize it for you. Google alone in this year's presidential election, if we don't do some extraordinary things to stop them, which might be impossible, Google alone will be able to shift between 6.4 million and 25.5 million votes in the presidential election, generally speaking, with no one having the slightest idea that they've been manipulated, and generally speaking, without leaving a paper trail for authorities to trace.
So when you say 6 to 24 million, are you talking about, does that include campaigns buying advertisements, say, which obviously could shift votes, but there would be a paper trail there, and that's kind of fair game. You can buy a TV ad or no, you're shaking your head, no.
Right, because all the usual forms of influence are, as you just implied, they're competitive. Because they're competitive, their net effect on elections, even the dirty tricks, the net effect is relatively small. I mean, here and there, it's a few thousand votes for sure. And yes, this year, the Dems might be doing ballot harvesting better than the Republicans are this year, but I actually saw Senator Daines give a talk about this issue, and he complained that we're not doing as good a job as the Dems on ballot harvesting. Let's get going on that, people. I saw him say that himself. So most forms of influence, everything you can think of from billboards to TV ads, are inherently competitive. But with Google and a couple of other tech companies, but mainly Google, there's a problem. If the platform itself wants to support one candidate or one party, there's nothing you can do. Google's home page is seen 500 million times a day just in the United States. What if on Google's home page right now, every now and then, in a partisan fashion, they're sending out register to vote reminders? What if they're doing that right this minute? I mean, let's say you got one of those messages on their home page. You wouldn't think twice about it, but if you hadn't registered yet, it might kind of nudge you a little bit, right?
Right.
Well, guess what? I happen to know, in fact, now your audience is the first audience in the world to know, because we just calculated this, that even though it's still early in the election process, right now, Democrats are getting register to vote reminders on Google's homepage at about 2.5 times the rate that Republicans are.
Is that because of the number of Democrats and Republicans using it, or is that because of who is getting the notifications?
No, we're talking about proportions here. I'm saying that proportionally speaking, I'm saying that Democrats are getting those reminders at 2.5 times the rate that Republicans are. Right now, that's happening.
It almost makes me want to throw my hands in the air and say, this corporation is so powerful, they control everything. I'm not a major research psychologist, so I don't look into it. But the moment you start to look into these things, you say, oh, wow, look, the situation is even worse than you thought it was. Well, what am I supposed to do? It's March of 2024. We have how many more months of dirty tricks until the elections?
But just to drive this point home, if Google is doing something like that, which they are because we're measuring it,
right,
and then at some point they're going to send out partisan mail-in your ballot reminders, and at some point they're going to send out partisan go vote reminders, and they're also stacking the deck in their search results. So their search results are highly biased. I can actually send your audience to a web page, and you can actually see what the bias is right now on Google search results.
How does one calculate that?
How does one tell? We right now are collecting data with their permission through the computers of more than 14,000 registered voters in all 50 states, politically balanced. And all that information coming into the computers of real people, we are aggregating in real time and analyzing in real time. Regarding bias, well, we're looking at the web pages that Google is sending people to, and we're using 3 different organizations' ratings of political bias, taking the mean, and then calculating a mean for each search position in Google search results. So I hope I'm not being too detailed here, but
No.
the point is we can measure very precisely whether there is bias in Google search results. And there's extraordinary bias in Google search results sufficient to shift millions of votes in this year's election.